So today I'm going to show you some techniques on India ink, using India ink to paint textures and different values and how to mix those as well. As you can see here, I took my square that I had split into 4 quadrants. And so what you can do before you get the paint is you can erase the grid line that you drew on especially lighter areas. The dark areas will cover up just fine. But I have my basic shapes mapped out. I have these shapes here. I have this shape here coming up. This is going to be a very, very dark shape. This is a little bit of a lighter section down here coming up right here. This is a very dark corner. It's a little bit dark here. So you can map out the darks and lights. That is helpful because then you'll know where to paint dark and where to paint light. All right, and it is good to check with the people who are next to you on the grid so that you make sure that everything matches up properly. I have my India ink palette, my big soft mop watercolor brush, and then you can see I have a little bit of a smaller brush along with a water cup and some paper towel and also test paper. It's good to test out your colors, your values on a scrap piece of paper so that you don't mix too dark or too light of a color. So when you get to painting, you'll have to decide what areas you want to paint first. And I suggest painting your lighter values first. And then you can always layer and darken your colors when you're ready for it. You just can't work backwards. You cannot lighten your shapes. I need everybody pencils down. You can't paint over black if you painted it too dark because it's like watercolor. It's all about the layering. So what I'm going to do is just start mapping out the areas that are a little bit lighter, and I can always build up my darker areas later. And I'm going to start with this big section that is light right here, and then it's kind of a darker gray. So in order to do that, I'm going to dip my brush in the water, and I'm just going to lay down water around where I want the India ink to travel. This creates kind of a roadmap for the India ink. You'll see that it will not go beyond where the water barrier is. Squeeze out the extra water, and I'm just going to take a little bit of the black, actually I'm going to water down my India ink a little bit. Take a little bit on my scrap piece of paper to test it, because in the container, in the palette, it looks pretty dark, but it actually is lighter than it looks. And so it's always good to test that. But like I said, you can always darken your colors. So I'm working in this section here, and I'm just gonna brush. I do need darker ink. You'll see that it spreads really easily through all of the water section, but it will stop there. And add a little bit more water. It does need to be lighter. Woo! If you do make a mess, you can take paper towel and just press it and lift out some of the color, but it will stain the paper. So I'm just gonna paint this kind of a medium gray. Up here, it actually does get darker. If you paint something too dark, like I said, like I demoed with just that little mistake, you can take a paper towel and lift out the color. I can also squeeze out the extra water out of my brush and then lift out the color with a dry paintbrush as well. So here I'm just lifting out that color. I can also make this area a little bit lighter by pressing my paper towel to lighten it up a little bit. Actually, it lifts out quite a bit. And then I can go back in and add my color if I need to. I'm just gonna look for how it gets darker here. And I am just gonna go ahead and finish off this darker section. So I'm gonna take my India ink. This is gonna be almost pure black. This is what the pure India ink looks like. And I actually want it to fade together a little bit. Notice when you paint wet next to wet, it starts to bleed. And I don't mind that because it should kind of fade together. So this is gonna be pure black, and then I'm gonna squeeze out the extra water out of my brush and just blend this edge with a dry brush so it fades a little bit better together. And then I'm gonna darken this. I'm gonna move to my smaller brush and darken this section here. And I know that this has to be really dark as well. And so I can do that a little bit later. Like I said, it is better to start with lighter colors first, unless you are very confident that it needs to be really, really, really dark, like this section in this corner. This section too is really, really dark, but I have to make sure I preserve those light sections.
So if a lot of your page is white, what do you do then?
If a lot of your paper is white, if it's as white as like a white piece of printer paper, you can leave it white. But if there's any sort of little bit of light gray, you'll want to make sure you water down the India ink just a little bit and then paint. For example, like on this, I think it's a finger. I'm just going to try taking my dirty water and I'm going to paint this. Actually, it's even lighter. See this little fingertip right here? It's even lighter than my dirty water because the India ink is really, really strong. And so I can kind of brush this down. And then I can take my paper towel and then I can blot it out. It's better to work just by subtly making things darker. And then I can, once this is dry, I can go back in and add those shadows. But don't go too crazy with the dark right away. Add little layers at a time. And why is this, I don't know why that happened. Maybe I blotted that out. So you want to make sure you look, and you can lift out colors with the paper towel. You can lift colors out with a dry brush by squeezing. You can see here, I'm squeezing the bristles. It's not even a clean brush, but I'm at least squeezing the bristles out so that when I go back down here, I can lift out some of the color a little bit too. The main goal though is to show your range of value and your texture as well. So work slowly in layers so that you don't overdo it with the dark.